Hi, I'm Laura, and this is Trope Touring Trilogy, and today I will be doing my February reading wrap-up. So, I read a lot less books in February than I did in January. In January, I read 9. This month, I only read 4. I did start one before the end of the month, but I didn't get that far. So less than half that I did last month. Still, I would like to talk about these books. So the first one I read was a reread. I had actually just read the physical book though in November before the movie came out, but then I re-listened / read the original trilogy and decided to re-listen to the prequel right after, or pretty soon after, because I was like, you know what? I can go back to this world again. And so I did. And that is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Susan Collins. So as you can see, I have read it physically, but at the beginning of the month, I did not read this physically. I listened to it for free from the library. And I really like this book. So The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is interesting because I feel like it's actually more in the moment in the writing style than The Hunger Games. The Hunger Games, I feel like, summarizes more than this book did. But I really enjoy this book. I like the movie too, but the book is way better. The movie is not as good compared to the other Hunger Games movies. And yeah, there's a lot of things interesting. So it's about in the morning of the reaping that will kick off the 10th annual Hunger Games in the capital, 18-year-old Coriolanus Snow is preparing for his one shot at glory as a mentor in the games. The once mighty House of Snow has fallen on hard times, its fate hanging on the slender chance that Coriolanus will be able to out-charm, outwit, and outmaneuver his fellow students to mentor the winning tributes. The odds are against him. He's been given the humiliating assignment of mentoring the female tribute from 12, the lowest of the low. Their fates are now completely intertwined. Every choice Coriolanus makes could lead to favor or failure, triumph or ruin. Inside the arena, it will be a fight to the death. Outside the arena, Coriolanus starts to feel for his doomed tribute and must weigh his need to follow the rules against his desire to survive, no matter what it takes. I really like this book. I thought it was interesting. I find a lot of times when it comes to villains, I feel like, or villain origin stories, it's either essentially it's to make their life so sad that they're just vengeful, or they're just evil the whole time and it's just showing that they were evil the whole time. This book, I feel like it's interesting in that there's nature versus nurture. He did go through some hard stuff, but a lot of people in his world did. And it feels like he didn't become bad because of bad things happening to them. He became bad because of the worldview he decided to adapt due to the influences in his life, including the evil Dr. Gauls. I really like this book. At first, I was kind of iffy about some of the connections Lucy Gray has to Katniss, such as the Hanging Tree song. Part of me is like, oh, do I really like the fact that Snow's thinking about his ex-girlfriend when Katniss sings the song? But overall, I've decided after the second reread that I like it. And I like the complexity of the characters. I like how Lucy Gray is kind of a mystery. And yeah, the thing is I would love to do a full review of this someday. And in my last reading wrap-up, I did explain the entire plot of some of the books, but right now I don't really feel like doing an entire review of this. So overall though, I like this book. I thought he was an interesting and complex character. This book delves into different views of humanity, and different characters represent different views on how humans should be treated. There's Thomas, they represent different philosophers from the Enlightenment. So a lot of this book is meant to discuss the state of the view of humanity that people were discussing during the Enlightenment. So there's people who reflect views such as Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Williams Wordsworth, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And it's really interesting, and I enjoyed it, and I would love to discuss it further because there's so much depth in this book. But right now, I just want to say it's good. And also, though, two more things I want to say. I keep saying I'm done and I have more things to say. I feel like this book is what YA could be. So not every book needs to be educational and depressing like this one. But I think this book is good in that it is like entertaining at times. But this book is age appropriate for teenagers, but it also asks them to think and expands their thoughts. So it's mature in that it respects their intelligence, but it's appropriate in that there's not extreme inappropriate content. So I think this book is a good example of what YA could be. And not every book has to be like discussing themes from the Enlightenment, but I do think YA could have more of this, of books that are asking readers to think more and really think about what the characters are doing and how it reflects on like their views of life and stuff. This book does ask readers to think, and I really appreciate that. Also, this book is literally Dark Academia meets The Hunger Games. That's my opinion, because it's more educational in setting, and it's The Hunger Games. So freaking Dark Academia meets The Hunger Games, the book, which isn't that important. I just want to say that. Then the second book I read was an audiobook again, and that was Divergent. So Divergent by Veronica Roth. That was a reread from when I was a kid. In Beatrice Pryor's dystopian Chicago world, society is divided into 5 factions, each dedicated to the cultivation of a particular virtue: candor, the honest; abnegation, the selfless; dauntless, the brave; amity, the peaceful; and erudite, the intelligent. On an appointed day of every year, all 16-year-olds must select the faction to which they will devote the rest of their lives. For Beatrice, the decision is between staying with her family and being who she really is. She can't have both, so she makes a choice that surprises everyone, including herself. During the highly competitive initiation that follows, Beatrice renames herself Tris and struggles alongside her fellow initiates to live out the choice they have made. Together, they must undergo extreme physical tests of endurance and intense psychological simulations, some with devastating consequences. As initiation transforms them all, Tris must determine who her friends really are and where exactly a romance with a sometimes fascinating, sometimes exasperating boy fits into the life she's chosen. But Tris also has a secret, one she's kept hidden from everyone because she's been warned it can mean death. And as she discovers unrest and growing conflict that threaten to unravel her seemingly perfect society, she also learns that her secret might help her save those she loves, or it might destroy her. And I had been re-listening to a lot of dystopians from when I was younger. I re-listened to The Hunger Games, which held up. I re-listened to The Uglies, which I go through a whole rant about it in my last wrap up, so I will link that. But Divergent, I have mixed feelings about. Divergent definitely reads like a novice writer wrote it, and Veronica Roth, that was her first book, and you can tell. It's not really a dystopian. Dystopians are supposed to be critiquing something about society. This book is literally just critiquing views on humanity. The Hunger Games is critiquing propaganda, and then Mockingjay I feel like goes into just war. I don't think the first 2 books do just war as much, but there's like propaganda is being explored in the whole trilogy, and just war is being explored, especially in Mockingjay. And then Ugly series is supposed to be exploring beauty standards. It's not really. It's more so exploring control, and then having rants about the environment in the book, but not actually exploring it in a way that you would expect a novel to explore themes. But I digress. But my point is Divergent is really not exploring societal things. It's more so exploring issues teens have. It's exploring finding where you belong, feeling like you don't fit in, feeling like it's very much like the factions are very cliquish, and the main character doesn't really feel like she fits in a clique, or she's trying to find where she belongs and go out from her parents and find who she is, not who she was told to be, which is a good theme to explore for teenagers. And I do think the author actually does genuinely want to explore it. The Ugly series, my issue was I felt like it was supposed to be about beauty standards, but then the author didn't really explore them that well. Whereas with Divergent, the author's genuinely is interested in exploring the themes of the story that she set up. So I really appreciate that. It's not like the most it's not the dystopian world that makes most sense. It's not really critiquing society like dystopian's supposed to be. It's more of like a fun sci-fi action for teens, which is fine, but it's very different than what a dystopia is. And while I would say the Hunger Games and even the Uglies, while the Uglies is flawed, they are definitely dystopians. Divergent really is more of an action sci-fi than a dystopian for teens. That's okay. I do think I think the characters are fun. I think Veronica Roth is pretty good at getting you to kind of understand characters and like characters pretty quickly. There's a lot of characters, and I remember there's a scene like we get to know some of the Dauntless Born initiates, and you don't spend much time with them, but she's able to have a bunch of cute, fun scenes to get you to know them. The book is very much like just scene after scene. The plot doesn't make the most sense. She's supposed to pretend she like trick them into thinking she's not Divergent, but then she proceeds to be top of her class and doing better than everyone, and like the fear landscape stuff and like the dream sequence type things, which if she was trying to appear more normal, it literally doesn't make sense why she wasn't caught. She did nothing to try to hide that she was Divergent. And then the twist at the end is the villains are going to attack everyone, and it's not really that relevant to the plot for most of it. Like the whole thing's about her finding where she belongs and becoming dauntless, and then that just gets pulled out at the very end. It's also interesting because most dystopians, the status quo is bad, but in this one the protagonist supports the status quo and the bad guys are the ones changing it, which makes sense because they're like killing innocent people, so like that is bad. But that I think is actually interesting and would be a cool thing to explore in a dystopian. But yeah, there's some issues with it at one point. Like, yeah, it could be better. It's not awful. The characters are fun and interesting. One thing I didn't like though is like the main guy was like beaten as a child by his abusive father. And then literally the next scene, the main girl like slaps him in the face and like he just forgives her. I'm like, dude, that's his trauma. And she slapped him in the face. Like, you don't just like get over that. And well, in some ways I understand why she did, because she was essentially sexually assaulted and like almost murdered. She was sexually assaulted and almost murdered by 3 of the boys in her class who grabbed her, blindfolded her, and almost chucked her off a cliff after one of them groped her. That's pretty traumatizing. And then she just went through a fear landscape, which is a simulation of this essentially, where she was again being taken by guys, like captured by a bunch of people, and she had a panic. Dude, she freaked out because that is literally what just happened to her, traumatizing happening to her again. And so she was freaking out, and then the main love interest goes and berates her because he's trying to appear like he doesn't like her. And so like it makes sense that she would freak out, and it even makes sense that she would hit him because the whole point of the story is she's becoming more aggressive because Dauntless is teaching her to behave this way. So it makes sense she would become this way. And also, like, she's, as far as we know, she's not even in the right state of mind. She is going through PTSD right now, trauma, freaking out. So it doesn't actually, it's not unforgivable that she would lash out in such a vulnerable moment, but it's not really explored thoroughly. It doesn't feel like she's freaking out when she hits him. It feels like she's more mad. And then also it's not explored that she hit him after he was abused. It's not that it ruins the couple for me that she did that and that he treated her. He essentially insulted her for her trauma and being traumatized. And then she hit him, which is his trauma and what traumatized him. And it's like, not like, he's just like, I'm sorry, I like forgot that you can be hurt and feel fear. It's like, dude, he just like thinks she doesn't have emotions, and that's why he berated her. And then she doesn't even apologize for hitting him, which is his trauma. And he also doesn't seem upset that she hit him, which is his trauma. It's like, dude, like, unless it's one of those things where he's like, oh well, people who love you hit you, but it's not, because he hates his dad, so it feels like he should know. It's not like he's used to being treated like this, so he accepts it. It feels like he should know it's bad. And it's not acknowledged that she literally hit him, which is what his dad did that abused him. And yeah, and so that's another issue. And also, like, I like a lot of the ideas behind the book. Like, her becoming more aggressive from being in Dauntless. That makes sense. That's a cool character arc idea. But she kind of gets like more aggressive and less selfless pretty quickly. And like, I think part of it is that she's not necessarily as selfless as most of the abnegation from the beginning. But I don't know. I feel like her character arc was not slow burn. Like, her character arc needed to be slower and more gradual. And I think it just comes with the author being a novice. I think Divergent actually has a lot of great ideas. I don't particularly care that it's not like necessarily a good dystopian, and that's not critiquing anything for specific. I can forgive that. I can forgive that the world doesn't make the most sense. I think this is a character story. You read it for the characters. While I enjoy the characters, I think the author is good at quickly introducing characters. I think she needs to grow, or needed to grow, hopefully she's grown since then, to actually do these gradual character arcs and also think things through and have more thorough consequences and understanding of what characters' actions are. Because, yeah, some of it could have been tightened up. And then the third book I read, which I actually posted a review of already, so I'm not going to go too thoroughly in it, but that's Just Stab Me Now by Joe Barab. It came out, and I read it right after I received it because I was super excited about it, and I really enjoyed it. It's definitely a flawed book. Again, first novel. But it's enjoyable. It's about a desperate mother, a dubious escort, and a deranged author who won't leave them alone. Caroline Lindley is determined that her new romance novel will be her best one yet. Fantasy, formal gowns, fencing, and of course a 20-something heroine to star in an enemies-to-lover plot with all of Caroline's favorite tropes. But Lady Rosamund Hawkhurst is a 36-year-old widow with 2 children. Her sole focus is facilitating a peace treaty between her adopted nation and her homeland, and she flatly refuses to take the correct approach to there being only one bed. What's an author to do? Based on her popular fantasy heroine YouTube short series, Jill Barab's debut novel brings us the best of both worlds. Both meta and medieval-inspired Terry Pratchett aficionados will enjoy the political intrigue compared with convivial, tongue-in-cheek satire. And then there's the slow burn fade to black romance too. If you loved Stranger Than Fiction and The Princess Bride, you will soon find yourself cheering on enemies to BFFs Rosamund and Caroline as together they learn what it means to be the hero of your own story. It's about an author who's writing her fantasy novel, and she's interacting with her characters as she's writing it. So we're getting the actual fantasy novel in its first draft form. We're getting her in her head talking to her characters, and we're getting her life. And I enjoyed it. My favorite part was the fantasy world. Sometimes I did get annoyed at her interruptions because I was like, gosh, I don't care about you. I want to care about the fantasy world. I care about the fantasy world. I want to read the fantasy. I don't care about the author. And then also I felt like the author's plot was underdeveloped. So I didn't care about her or the characters in her world as much as I did the fantasy world. That being said, I really liked the fantasy world enough that I did overall enjoy the book because that made up for the aspects that I didn't care for. But it's not perfect, but I do recommend checking out my video if you want more details, because I reviewed it. And then finally, the fourth book I read this month is a graphic novel, and it's Scott Westerfeld, Uglies. It's Uglies Cutters by Scott Westerfeld. So last month, check out my wrap-up. I go through all the Uglies books, the first 3 in the series, Extras, which is a book that takes place years later from a different character's perspective in the same world. So it's like not a prequel. It's like the opposite of a prequel, but I don't know the word for it. And then I read the first graphic novel, which is Uglies from Shay's perspective, and this is Pretties from Shay's perspective. The second novel in the Uglies manga series, featuring Shay's point of view and set in the world of Uglies. Experience the riveting dystopian Uglies series seen as never before through the eyes of Shay, Tally Youngblood's closest and bravest friend, who refuses to take anything about society at face value. From the moment we are born, we are considered threats in need of special management. We are watched and shaped and exploited by a force most of us never see, all to keep us safe. Do you feel safe, or do you feel like you're in a cage? Shay. In Pretty's, Tally Youngblood and her daring best friend Shay both underwent the operation that turned them from ordinary uglies into stunning beauties. Now, this thrilling new graphic novel reveals Shay's perspective on living in New Pretty Town. And the way she sees it, there's more to this so-called paradise than meets the eye. With the endless parties and custom-made clothing, life as a pretty should be perfect. Yet Shay doesn't feel quite right. She has little to no memory of her past. It's as if something in her brain has inexplicably changed. When she reunites with Tally and the Crims, her rebellious group of friends from Uglyville, she begins to recall their last departure to the wild and the headstrong leader she used to be. And as she remembers the truth about what doomed their escape, Shay decides to fight back against the status quo, against the mysterious special circumstances, even against her own best friend. There's only 2 books from her perspective. We do not get a third one. We don't get a retelling of the third book from Shay's perspective. And I think this one was better than the first one, Ugly Shay Story. This is better. It's not as good as the book Pretty's, but I feel like we did get some interesting interactions with the character Shay. We got to see more of her. I think, honestly, I liked the Pretty's book better. So then I preferred the graphic novel retelling of it from a different character's point of view better than I liked the Uglies one, because I didn't like Uglies as much either. The art style, it's pretty, but it doesn't really do the concept justice of the Pretties versus the Uglies, because they really don't, like, the Uglies don't look normal enough compared to the Pretties because it's a manga style. Manga doesn't really look normal. It adds a romance for Shay, and honestly, I kind of liked her getting a boyfriend. I appreciated her getting a boyfriend. We don't actually ever hear about them being a couple in the original trilogy, but I'm cool with that. But yeah, I don't really recommend you read the manga, so if you love Uglies, these are not necessary. They don't add that much. I think this adds more by showing us more of Shay and giving her a romance. But yeah, I honestly don't remember a lot of it. It was pretty forgettable, and I read it at the end of the month, so I should remember it the best. But I don't. So yeah, I do. That's all the books I've read this month. So this wrap up was way quicker. I didn't go as in depth because I really wanted to rant about the Ugly series when I did the last wrap up. This one though, it's like Divergent. I said everything I wanted to say about Divergent right now. If I want to say more, I think I'll have to script out in a video. This book, I don't really feel like saying much about it. This book, I already did a super long, over-hour long video. I don't have more to say in this. And then this one, I would like to say more, but I don't think I can do it justice in a quick wrap-up. So, yeah, that's it. I did start one other book, and that is Dune by Frank Herbert. I have not gotten very far, and it's already into May. But I have been reading this. I saw the movie. I'm going to see the movie tomorrow, so there's no way I'm finishing this book before I see the movie, but I'm really enjoying it, and I also bought it this month, so that's another thing. And I bought one other book this month. I figured I'd also like haul the books I bought in February, and that is Ever After, A Cinderella Story. It's literally a retelling of the movie. It's a novel by Wendy Lagia based on the screenplay by Susanna Grant and Andy Tennant and Rick Paris. This is literally an adaptation of a movie into a book. So I got this after seeing the movie to read the original book. This is the reverse. I love the movie, and this book's based on the movie. I don't expect it to be good, but I do want to read it. And it's because I just love Ever After so much. Part of me is just like, there's no Ever After merchandise. I'll get the book. And even if the book sucks, I will have it. And I'll have it on my shelf as like a collector's thing. Because I do collect books. I don't get books that I don't intend on reading. But I do like to have a collection of books. And this book, I would like to have in my collection because I love Ever After so much. So, I do hope to finish this book soon. Not very far in, but I do hope to finish it soon. I do hope to read this in March too. I'm going to try to read the books pretty soon after I get them. I don't want to be buying lots of books. So if I do get books, I want to read them soon, though there is a book sale in March, and it's like by the bag, so I don't think I'll be able to read all of them within the next 2 months because I have so many books I just told you about that I want to read that have nothing to do with the book sale. But anyway, though, those are all the books I read and that I got this month. So let me know what you think of them. Let me know if there's any of them you would like to see more in-depth discussions about. Again, this one already has one. I am tempted to make a whole video about the Uglies, even though I kind of said most of what I want to say about the Uglies in the January wrap-up. I might do a whole scripted video about it. Let me know what you think of that. And I would love to talk about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes in its own thing, but I feel like that needs to be like a thorough video essay, and I can't just do that off the top of my head. But yeah, anyway though, that's everything. Let me know what you think, if you've read any of these books, if you're interested in them, if you're interested in more in-depth discussions, or and let me know what you read this past month, and if you like them, if you have any good books you would like to recommend to me, or any books that you didn't like. Honestly, I pretty much enjoyed most of the books I've read this month. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was great. I actually appreciated it more on my reread because there were some things I was iffy about, but I decided I liked them more the second time, or I accepted them the second time. So this was the best book I read this month, 5 stars. Then the rest of the books were kind of all mid, to be honest. Divergent was more flawed than I remembered, but I enjoyed it. So I think it's like all the other books I read were definitely flawed books, but I enjoyed them. Divergent, it's flawed, but I enjoyed it. Just Have Me Now is flawed, but I enjoyed it. And even UGLIES Cutters is flawed, but I enjoyed it, which is great because the first graphic novel adaptation was just boring and I had no opinion or thoughts on it. I was just like, that happened. I don't care. But yeah, anyway though, that's everything. Let me know all your thoughts. Please tell me about what you read this past month, what you thought of what I've read, if you'd like more in-depth discussions of some of them. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.